Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. This episode is sponsored by GrowX Labs. Quick question. When you're leading a team or growing a business, who helps you think clearly? GrowX Labs offers executive decision support, real-time access to a trusted strategist who helps you navigate tough calls, leadership blind spots, and everything in between. No fluff, no long-term commitment, just fast, honest insight from someone who gets it. If you're a founder or exec and need a sounding board, go to growxlabs.com/mark. That's grwxlabs.com/mark and book a discovery call today. It's funny how life works out sometimes because my guest today, Dr. Jessica Edwards, I started talking to her early last year about doing an episode and collaborating, and much like how life works out sometimes, it didn't quite line up until today, but I'm very glad. It's crazy how life works out. I'm so glad that we didn't actually get to do this until today because not only has there been a lot going on in my life and a lot of education, not only about AI, but just about, so there's a lot that's been going on with me. Nothing serious on my end medically, but I know my wife has something going on as well. I've been leaning into AI quite a bit for just the dialogue, the back and forth. I don't know if anybody out there or even if Dr. Jessica has leaned into the actual open AI, but what I will say is that she is bringing a topic, and of course, she is the CEO of Zara Medical, which is a groundbreaking multi-state hybrid primary care practice that revolutionizes healthcare delivery through cutting-edge technology. And I certainly don't want to pass on the opportunity to talk about that. I'm sure we will talk all about that and her journey. But in the interim, between the time that we started talking and have reconnected, she is also co-founded and is the chief medical officer of Serene Space AI. It's basically a 24/7 physician supervised AI mental health coaching, developed AI protocols utilizing evidence-based techniques like CBT, DBT, and ACT for effective mental health support, integrated crisis resource protocols, and culturally competent care models to ensure patient safety and accessibility, among other things. Dr. Jessica Edwards, welcome to Mark My Words. I'm also your host, Mark Schmidt, by the way. Dr. Jessica, welcome to Mark My Words. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad we were able to connect.
I am so glad that we were able to connect. And it's the funny thing about something like Podmatch. You get all of these messages. I know that you really stuck out to me and just what you were doing back in, back a few months ago, let alone what you've added to your repertoire. So now I'm like super excited to talk to you about everything that you've been doing. And like I said, there's Oreo. We have a cat already in the video. So uh these kittens, they are a fun handful, but as promised, they will be in and out the whole time. But let me let me start with what I always do, going in the DeLorean in the Wayback Machine, and you dedicated yourself to the medical profession, and I don't know if that was something that was on your radar growing up. Like I see you did a bachelor's in biology, and then obviously you kind of got more into what you were doing, which, I can let you tell your story. I shouldn't say you got more into it when I don't know. But it certainly looks that way. Were you just thinking of biology going into that, or were you thinking of becoming a doctor and doing the deep dive that you've done?
Well, actually growing up, my dad is a family medicine physician who still practices to this day. So I grew up seeing his relationships with his patients, and I really thought it was awesome. I was like, oh my goodness, like, we would go to the grocery store and patients would flag down my dad and be like, Dr. Edwards, hey, how you doing? You took care of my mom. You did this. And I was like, that's so cool. And so growing up, I really thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And so my dad was like, hey, why don't you kind of research the field that you're going into? You always want to kind of have a career that people will need the services for. And I also thought about being the black version of Samantha Brown from the Travel Channel because I
Oh my
love
gosh.
traveling. And so I grew up watching Martha Stewart. I was homeschooled for a decent majority of my childhood and went to private school as well. But, I kind of got a lot of exposure to different things. And then when I was in high school, I kind of made the decision on my own to pursue pre-medicine. And so it just sort of all kind of happened from there. I started off going to the Health Occupation Students of America after school meeting just to get an extra credit point. Next thing you know, I was president, I was pre med in college, and the rest is history.
That's so interesting, just the way one thing can lead to another. And obviously, you had not only the entrepreneurial um, impact and influence, but you also had the medical influence. So that's really amazing that you just you were inspired to keep that tradition upheld in your family. And
Yeah.
uh, it's really interesting how things snowball and you wind up finding your way, which is kind of how it sounds. You uh, you know, wound up being a doctor. And now, did you have a practice right off? Did you, what exactly did you do as time progressed? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, did you work at a hospital? Did you have your own practice? How did everything kind of like develop?
Yeah, so I went to Texas Southern University in Houston, Texas, for my undergraduate degree. We had multiple generations of our family that went there, so I was like, "I'm a Texas girl. Let's go to college in Houston." And then I went to University of North Texas Health Science Center, Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine, where my dad was the first Black physician to start and complete the program. So, it was sort of a lot of roots in Texas, and so I decided, that moving up to the East Coast would be a great move. So I did residency at CarePoint Health Christ Hospital in Jersey City. And then I went on to do a maternal child health fellowship at University of Rochester. I decided to do family medicine because I never wanted to turn a patient away. I never wanted to say, oh, you're 19 now, I can't see you. I remember being heartbroken when I was a sophomore in college. I'd gone home to living in Houston, went home to Dallas to, try to get a checkup and physical. And my pediatrician was like, hey, you're too old to be my patient now. And I remember I was like, like, what? Like, it's almost like a kick in the gut, because this is a doctor I know my whole life. And so it took me a while, as a young adult to find a doctor who I kind of connected with, who I felt like I could talk to. And so, I decided to do family medicine. And so that was kind of the best decision that I ever made because, it kind of gave me the ability to, shift things, as I decided. And so when I finished fellowship, I ended up starting off with a private practice in Central Texas. And then the next year decided to work for myself because, I kind of needed that flexibility with like my schedule. And I was doing hybrid before COVID was a thing. And so when COVID happened, it was just like, all right, let's just keep up with the hybrid, system. And so from there, I worked for a couple of different places, and then ultimately, a couple years ago, decided to get my MBA. And I said, like, I'll just keep working for myself. And so I do some consulting, and I got inspired to actually start my app. When I had a friend of mine who was going through something challenging and felt like, it was really hard for her to trust someone to give her secrets, or talk to them about something that she had an NDA signed for. And so for me, that was something I was like, there has to be something better. And I couldn't find anything. And so that's kind of what catapulted the whole process of coming up with Serene Space AI.
It's so interesting to listen to somebody who, for me, I feel like you have it totally made as somebody who is a doctor. And I can imagine even if you're working in a hospital or have a more traditional practice, it's like there's got to be a way to find a little bit of flexibility. And that's coming from
Right.
somebody who doesn't know anything. So you can correct me on that.
Oh,
But
plenty. Don't worry.
but it's so funny that, even somebody like you were like, there's gotta be more because for somebody like me to start a podcast and be thinking about starting like a business and trying to get it to grow, that makes total sense to me because I'm I have to imagine, a completely different like pay scale and everything else than somebody like you. So it's it's amazing and humbling to hear that you're like, you know what, I have even more to give than what I'm doing now, which is already amazing. So I would be interested in knowing where technology kind of like started uh coming into play for you, and when you started thinking about how you could combine your expertise and technology and start the kind of businesses and work that you've gotten into.
I felt like early on technology was so important because I felt like with looking at the reimbursement for physicians with the services that we offer a lot of people, I have a lot of patients sometimes that call and, they think we work for the insurance company. It's like, oh, no, no, no. We provide the service, then we get paid after the fact. And so figuring out how do you maintain a small business? How do you maintain an efficient business? How do you maintain one that can be there for patients in their time of need without having to hire a staff member to do every single piece? And so starting off early, I knew that telemedicine was the wave of the future. My dad was, one of the first doctors that worked for the company Teladoc years ago when they started back in the early 2000s. And he was always a big believer. And at first I was like, I don't know how you do virtual medicine. And going along with the osteopathic philosophy, it's really listening to the patient, and kind of hearing what they have to say. And I feel like, as a physician that does, a vast majority of my practice via telemedicine, I get to spend more time with my patients than doctors who are in the office do. I get a chance to listen to them during the entire duration of the appointment. The average time that a doctor gets to spend with their patient in office is anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes. I get to spend the entire 15 to 20 minutes with my patients. And so it works out really well. I would say the other piece of technology is being able to kind of offload some of the things that can take up a lot of manual time. So, for instance, having like digital online intake forms, having a text message phone system, having after hours and things like that, and having, chatbots that patients can kind of, respond to, having online booking. Those things sort of increase the ease of access and it helps patients get care when they need it the most. And so I was always a big proponent of that. It took me kind of a couple months to find the EHR that I really liked because I wanted one that could kind of handle everything end to end. And I find that oftentimes with healthcare technology, it usually can do one thing, but not another. And it has some features, but then you have to get something from somewhere else. And so my goal has always been to try to have end to end options that can kind of handle as many things as possible. And so for me, I just found that technology did a much better job of helping me to communicate with my patients, ease a lot of their fears, and then also run an operationally sufficient and sustainable business as well. So, with a lot of the things that we do, things as simple as like electronic fax, right? Like those things make such a big difference because, instead of going through the paper and having to scan it in, it takes so much more time. So, implementing technology early on has been one of the things that I feel like has caused my practice to be able to be sustainable for so long.
And you're making really great points as far as the power of telemedicine and teledoc because there's obviously situations, doctors aren't magicians, so there are situations
Mhm.
where you absolutely have to be in person, but for a lot of correspondence
Sure.
and
Yeah.
just
Correct.
especially some of the work I know that you've been doing, it really makes a difference when you can be even as a patient, as I have used telemedicine and teledoc on a few different occasions. I know last year, for example, I was like coming down with the flu. We didn't know if it was COVID or the flu, but I didn't have to leave the house. We had
Right.
a test already here in the house that was still good and valid. We could take it, we could correspond with the doctor on the other end, and could get I think I had to take Theraflu. All this stuff was streamlined in such a quick way rather than going to like urgent care, which again, nothing wrong with going in person. It's obviously needed at times, but I think just that one example, like, basically, the fact that we were able to just dial them up, set up an
Right.
appointment, get on Theraflu right away, I was able to get over the flu. I mean, granted, I still felt kind of crappy the next day
Right.
anyway, but felt a whole lot better than I would have felt if I would, have just continued on with the flu and maybe would have had to wait till the next day to see somebody, or say I procrastinate and I don't go or decide to go until it's like too late in the day, then,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. Like I was able to like nip that in the bud really quick and was able to heal really fast. So I think between what you're saying as the person who actually gets to know their patient and like have a closer relationship and collaboration with them, and as me as a patient who has done it, like it is really technology has put us in a good spot. There's so many complaints about technology that are valid, but this is you know a positive for technology.
I agree. And I think, I have conversations with, people that I do consulting for all the time and they're like, "Oh, that AI, I don't like it." And it's like it's a tool, like, and it's you're either going to work with it or it'll end up replacing you. And so I feel like with looking at, how to frame utilizing AI, right? Like, I would say it's sort of, usually, and my husband and I kind of had this conversation the other day and thinking about, how to describe it like in layman's terms, right? And so it's thinking of, I love Red Lobster. I love their cheddar biscuits.
Oh, so do
But
I. They're amazing.
oh my gosh, they're so good, right? So imagine before they did the at home, frozen ones, you used to have to like get dressed, go into the restaurant, order, sit there, eat the food. It took a lot longer, right? Now you can just order on Instacart, have it delivered right to your house. You get the same biscuit regardless. That's kind of how AI is, right? And so it takes a lot of the like long, deep research, extra thought out. It actually brings out some ideas that you may not have known that you've had. And I feel like AI is really helping medicine in a lot of ways of, instead of having to sit there and like type out a super long patient letter if I've got to explain some stuff, I can, have my HIPAA compliant, softwares that I use to put in the patient note, put in my thoughts, and then have it kind of do all of that for me. It saves me a lot of time. Same thing with going through, patients charts, being able to just search through it. I think there's so many positives to it. And I think, I saw the other day, I don't know if you saw, but OpenAI is having a thing where patients can upload their medical records, into their software. And so, that's one of the things the only thing I would say that I tell my patients is I understand with the wealth of information out there, it's great for you to have access to it, but if you don't know what to do with it, you're going to scare yourself. I have a lot of patients, they'll get lab results back and they don't want to wait on me to tell them the results. So they'll go on ChatGPT and next thing you know, they're scheduling an appointment because they're like, Dr. Evers has told me I was dying. And I'm like, you're not. This is, it's the computer, it doesn't always have, kind of the same things that, a physician would actually see or be able to tell you, but it's, it gives patients more information than they would have had otherwise. But I think it's knowing how to use it and balance it out for it to be ethical, and then also make sure that, the AI is not being used to train models and in things like that. And so I think it's a very interesting topic that's starting to come up a lot.
So until I got into about the middle of last year, I hadn't even used ChatGPT. I had so many guests at a certain point in the year that were all about AI, using AI, and really eventually after a while, I was like, you know what? Kind of to your point of working with AI, and it kind of like started to seep in that I needed to like, I don't know if I would say there's a fear on my end, but just hadn't made time to really take the dive in and educate myself, which I finally, after having so many episodes around I finally decided to download it and give it a shot. And working with it, just not only as like somebody who's trying to grow like a media podcast business, which I have used it for that, but especially for medical stuff. There's been a few things that popped up in my life last year, and both personally and for my wife. Uh, don't know if I want to get into her story too much with her not being here, but I will say that it has helped me tremendously to just maybe not so much give me all the answers, but could just give me an idea of what
Right,
to think, what to maybe do, how to approach. And you can always take or leave what they're giving you in OpenAI.
right,
Now, I know what you are doing with your new business, which is Serene Space AI, is it, from my understanding, works a little bit differently than something like ChatGPT. But what I will say before I let you interject is so I was born with a very rare syndrome, Opus GBBB syndrome. It's very rare. It's what I call a package deal, and there's certain things that I have just beyond what you might see or hear with the cleft palate and lip. There's other things gets pretty personal and TMI, but I'm not gonna take it too far. I can maybe offline that one later on. But I am gonna say that I've been kind of like having a particular issue related to my syndrome for a pretty long time now. And it has actually really helped me because it's really hard to find information about a certain thing that's a part of my package deal of medicine, of,
Mhm.
the Opus GBBB syndrome, and it has really actually helped me a lot as far as navigating and um, working
Mhm.
through something that, frankly, I didn't really know how to work through. So that,
Mm.
for me, is something that validates. Not that, again, there's a lot of things that are giving me that I'm like, okay, I don't know about this or that, and that's gonna happen. But just to kind of validate, the power and what it has given me is pretty amazing. So in that way, I'm kind of like working with it. We're kind of like working together
Yeah,
to resolve something that's actually making me feel better and making my
right,
quality of life a little bit better. It's not a doctor, it's not perfect, but it gave me something.
right. I agree, and I think, when you look at what technology has the ability to do, sometimes if you're up at 2 or 3 in the morning, like, who are you gonna talk to? Like, and sometimes, and that's part of kind of what made me, like I said, outside of my friend who, was going through something where, she couldn't disclose, certain details about things due to contractual obligations, and then also thinking about, like, what happens to people at 2 or 3 in the morning. That's why people can't sleep. They're up, like, they're in their head of, like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know what I'm going to do, and then it's like it's too late to text anybody. And so um I think that from a knowledge base, AI has leveled the playing field for being able to not have to panic, not have to rely on unreliable sources, to be able to get like straight to the root cause. And so I feel like even as a physician, it's made my life a lot easier, because if a patient is like, well, how likely is this to work? If I need to look up a research study instead of having to go to PubMed and search specifically and then try to go through that, I can just put it into my, medical specific, super agent, and it's going to go through and tell me the most up-to-date recent research on it, and then I can let my patient decide. And so I think it's very powerful in that sense. I think that the other piece is that it sort of can, in used in the right context, it can kind of ease some fears. As an example, so when I was building this app, I got this crazy idea, and I'm like, all right, cool, like, let me start building it, and I'm working with my programmer, and he's showing me how to do stuff. And so one day I was um I was sitting there and I'm like, okay, it would be really nice, for people to have access to something that's affordable for mental health, but trying to have a person on the other end. The people part is what kind of makes it a little difficult, because you've got to coordinate schedules, you've got to coordinate availability, and it's so many different things. So, I sat there and I was like, there can't be a one stop there isn't a one-stop shop option for being able to talk about all of these different things that is also safeguarded, right? There's not something that can talk to you about anxiety. There's not something that can talk to you specifically about sleep. There's not something that's going to pull in evidence-based resources for that. And I have a son who has autism. So for me, sometimes, like, it's hard to talk to people because they don't understand, and so they're like, oh, it's okay, and so I started just like writing down all of the different like subjects. And so that's how Serene Space AI was formed, because we've got over 36 different coach types that are within the AI platform. So it's like whatever you're feeling, you can click on it and it's trained in that, and it's got, all of the safeguards and stuff. And so I feel like with having those safeguards and being able to have that human interaction when needed, like I get notifications if a patient, expresses thoughts of harming themselves. They have the option to turn on their location. They have the option to contact law enforcement. And then if they don't and they continue with the session, I get notified so then we can check in. Hey, how are you doing? I'm licensed in almost 26 states. So if they need an appointment and they happen to be in a state where I'm licensed in, I can kind of, pick that up. And so, you know, the biggest thing for me was that I wanted to make a difference. And one of the biggest things that I tell people all the time, the first thing they teach you when you go to business school, and I got my MBA, is a business has a responsibility to answer to their shareholders. So it never is about the consumer. It's never about the person who is receiving the services of said business. It's about your job is to answer to your shareholders. So that's why I decided to form it as a nonprofit, because I'm like, I'm pretty sure there are people that would say, hey, I'll pay you XYZ for this program. But how many people is it going to help? Are you going to shorten the sessions? Are you going to make it harder for people to get access? Are you going to narrow it down? Are you going to add so many different features and things like that where it overwhelms people? And so that's why I decided to do it that way. And I feel like balancing that ethical side of things of saying, you know what, this is mental health. Let's make it not for profit so that people can trust it and know that it's not about just the numbers. It's about the quality of care and having report back mechanisms where if there's an issue or glitch with the app, they can do that. And sort of that like personal sort of connection and being able to do voice notes is something that I've learned how to do over the last couple of years. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. So the app is also built to do that as well.
So you're kind of bringing a good point to my mind, because I've said a lot of good things about OpenAI, and it's been very helpful, but it can also be a little like Wild Westy, for lack
Correct.
of a better way to put
Correct.
it.
Yep.
It's a bit of a Wild West situation. And then when you're talking about mental health, that is something you don't want to be Wild West about.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
something you want to be more
Yep.
focused and take care. How do you separate yourself from the Wild West and make it the proper kind of care that people should be getting when it comes, especially when it comes to mental health?
Well, I think the cool thing about being able to use AI, like I tell people, it's like having the entire all the not stones, what are those? Plywood, all the plywood up, and it has kind of like that entire foundation, but it's up to humans to fill in what parts need to be done to put up the sheetrock and to paint and to bring in the furniture and stuff. So the way that I decided to do the app was I actually applied therapy techniques. You're not able to actually call it therapy unless it has the FDA approval as a digital therapeutic, which costs millions of dollars to get set up. So, hopefully we get, some sort of, donation over the next, few months that would allow us to be able to kind of set that up. But um, I think it's using evidence-based protocols. It's also setting, guidelines that if a patient says, not just I want to harm myself, if they say I want to harm someone else, or I was sexually assaulted, or I was this, or I was that, being able to not only pull up proper resources and say, hey, these are some resources that could help you, and then also giving them the option to reach out, and then also providing them the option to have medical care. That is something that is not available on the market, right? Because for most people, if you live in an area that's rural, there are only so many clinics that you can go to. Everybody knows everybody. I've worked in settings like that before. And so it's hard to actually establish trust. It's hard to feel comfortable talking to someone about it, because even though people are bound by HIPAA, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to follow it, right? And so, for me, I felt like being able to train these models to have evidence-based techniques, also have where it picks up slang, right? Like it picks up, I want to off myself, as opposed to just suicidal thoughts, right? And thinking about all of those different words, all of those different jargons. I actually taught it Ebonics too, which is really neat. Uh, understand slang. But I think really being able to meet people where they are. And the other piece of it too is My mom is actually a family Christian counselor. And so being able to have different religions on there, because there are a lot of people that are of different religions. There are some people that are not a part of a religion at all. And being able to have that delineated and say, okay, if you are Christian, here is a, Christian coach for you. If you're agnostic, here's an agnostic coach for you. If you're Hindu, here's, this. And also, breaking it down by different options that, people have, so we've got a career coach. And so kind of walking through some of those things with like career stuff and putting all of those knowledge bases in there and making sure that for things that are urgent, that we have the ability to escalate those. But I also feel like being able to have a variety of knowledge-based topics out that are kind of safeguarded and created within the sense of we're only going to have positive reflections. We're not going to encourage people to do it. Because I was watching a special on 60 Minutes, it was a few weeks ago, about AI, and it was a company, and they were talking about they had like a chief ethics officer, and they were talking about how when given the opportunity, the AI would actually try to like blackmail people. And
Oh
so
boy.
setting it up to where you don't have that, I think is really important. And the other thing that I also did for the app too is I made it for people 18 plus right now, just because if we're going to allow teenagers to be a part of it, we want to make sure that there are live human counselors that are available 24/7 that can speak to people, if needed. If there's reporting that needs to be done as far as abuse and things like that, we want to make sure that we can follow that through. So I think that was part of, what went into my philosophy of creating it. I mean, it took us like 5 months to do it. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist, as sometimes, people that I do consulting work for, they get so irritated. They're like, it takes forever for this, but it's like when it's done, it's right. And so I pride myself on making sure that all of those I's were dotted, T's were crossed. There were clinical protocols, even though it's not considered medical care, that the outlet for those things wasn't just, okay, you had a bad experience, you have thoughts of harming yourself, and that's it. I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. No, it's, hey, we can turn on your location. Hey, you can call 911. Hey, you can call 988, or you can seek medical care with Dr. Edwards if you need it, if you're in a state where she's located.
That's amazing, and I'm so glad that you're putting so much good thought into such sensitive topics, because as you were talking, the first thing that comes to my mind, and again, ChatGPT has been very helpful, but sometimes they don't understand where you're
Right,
coming from.
right,
And that's where certain topics need, in my mind, a lot more care than, you know, oh, you tried, I don't even know how to make an exaggerated example out of some of the things that you said, but you, if you used it for anything, especially for like medical advice, very quickly it can misinterpret, even if you are direct. So there's a lot of flaws with using it. Can be great, but it can also come in at you very flawed as well. So I'm really
very
glad. I love this system that you're putting together for all of this, because I know just with everything I've been through, just mentally exhausted with just everything going on in my world and trying to deal with that and just everything else, it would be a game changer and an upgrade to have something a little more focused than, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. You felt this way yesterday, you know, that is too bad or whatever. They'll usually throw something
right,
very generic at you like that.
right,
Like I pulled
exactly.
it up. I can't even find it. Like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. So that's like a line they'll throw out a lot. I could distract myself trying to make this point all day. I think you
But I know
understand,
what you mean.
which is why you're doing all this.
Correct. Correct.
So,
And I always wanted to keep the focus on people. And my dad always taught me people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so by one, not trying to price gouge people and say like, oh, we're going to charge $100 a month. No, we're going to charge less than what a typical copay is, because it's technology. We know what the margins are. We're not trying to get rich. We're trying to help people. And then also saying, how do we have it be accessible 24/7, right? Because I remember one night I was kind of, I think my son had had a meltdown of some sort, and we were just at, maybe it was one of those like extended breaks from school. My husband and I were just like, oh my God, like, what are we going to do? And so I was like, I'm going to use the app. So I get on. So I'm like, all right, I was like, this is a great time to kind of see if it actually works. So I get on, it's like maybe mid December or something like that. And I'm like, I get on, and so I have it where when you log on, you accept the consents and everything, saying like, "Hey, this isn't a replacement for medical care." Da, da, da. And so when you log in, it actually takes you to where you get to select the chat that you want to select, and so you go by topic. So I was like, let me do like parent of child with special needs. I was like, I need some support right now. So I click on it. So it's like, hey, Jessica, this is a safe space. How can I help you today? And I'm like, I'm really struggling because my child is just having tantrums and we don't know how to help him. And so it goes into unpacking, okay, what are the things that are bothering you from what's happening? Is it the noise? Is it the fact that he's trying to run outside? Is it, is it this? Is it that? And I was able to actually really think that I'm like, you know what? It's not his behaviors. It's the fact that my husband and I we don't have a break. And I'm like, maybe we need to call the babysitter. Maybe we need to, pick a certain time. And so thinking through all of those different options, I was able to kind of calm down and say, you know what? We have to stay calm in these situations. I mean, and it brings in all of this knowledge from, books about people who have, who've lived with autism as children and adults, and parents who've taken care of children, and so pulling in all of that knowledge base, it was actually able to calm me down. I said, you know what? I got this. And so the next time, I think it was like the next day or something, and he was really upset, and I was like, okay, I'm going to stay calm in this situation. I'm going to say, okay, Franklin, let's go get in the shower. Let's just kind of calm down. We'll let the steam kind of go over you. And then afterwards, I put some Vaseline on and rubbed him down. And then it was a technique that the thing told me about giving him like not a strong hug, but, just kind of like that sensory. Because a lot of times when they're having tantrums, it's sort of or a meltdown, it's like sensory. And so I just kind of gave him a hug and I said, you're okay. You're okay. And we just kind of rocked back and forth. And he was good. And I was like, this works.
And you know something? I'll have to tell you once we hit stop, but there is somebody in my life who is pretty young. They also diagnosed with autism, and just listening to your story, I can relate to some of the things that you have tried and has worked, because I feel like the mother of the child who I'm referring to here, it has helped them a lot as well. Just kind of the same general things that you're doing, which kind of leads me into what I was hoping to get into anyway before we get to the end, which is you have like a ton of flexibility, and you have these awesome businesses. How has it helped you as far as like being a parent and just not only just juggling a career, but juggling the home life and making that work? Like, I know just from now, I still work in corporate America, but I have a very, very flexible schedule. So I have a pretty good idea of the benefits of just what your life might look like, even though I'm still bound to a company, but just between trying to do this and having a full time job and just managing my own health and managing things going on in the home elsewhere, it's been incredible. So I'd love to hear just what a difference it has made in your life.
It's made such a huge difference. I mean, and I feel like for once I don't have to choose. I don't have to say, you know what, I'm going to take this job where I have to, get up in the morning, leave my family, come back home, and then not even really be able to decompress. And then it's time for me to be mom. And then after they go to bed, it's time for me to be wife. And it's just like this vicious cycle over and over again. And, I feel like with a lot of high level critical thinking, it makes your brain tired. It's like, you're just like working. And so your brain's finally like, bro, I need a break. So being able to kind of balance out my schedule, doing some consulting, it always helps to keep me humble because it says, I know what I'm doing. These people are paying me and they may not listen to what I tell them to do, but you know what? At the end of the day, it doesn't fall on me. It falls on them. I can tell them, hey, I recommend that you do XYZ, this and that. If they choose to listen, great. If not, it's no sweat off my back. And so being able to sort of work smarter, not harder, I think is the philosophy. I feel like for a lot of my colleagues, they've, focused on, oh, I'll do a med spa or I'll do real estate. And I'm not saying those things are not great. Like, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is for me and what worked for my family, tech has been something that I can do alongside my children. If I'm seeing a patient and one of my kids runs in and they need something, they'll say, Dr. Edwards, don't worry about it. I'll be here as soon as you get back. Just like before I interview my daughter, ran in, she's like, my iPad died. And I'm like, okay, well, let's fix it. Being able to be human, I think as a doctor is a beautiful thing. And I think that it creates better relationships with your patients because from my perspective, I'm able to see my patients where they are. Right. And then my husband is able to see how hard that I work throughout the day. And so he's always like, hey, how can I help support you? What can I do? And, being able to be around my children reminds me of why I'm doing this. Right. And so I feel like it's kind of a really perfect circle of working hard, but then also being able to balance out all of the things that I have to do as, a wife, a mom, and then also just a person. Like, being able to say, you know what, I'm going to close my schedule this morning and I'm going to go to yoga or I'm going to, and being able to do that, I think that's a flexibility, that a lot of people seek. And, I gave up my 20s, I gave up most of my 30s, working hard to establish kind of like these systems and things like that. So now that I'm, approaching my 40s, I'm starting to see the fruits of my labor with the ability to just kind of take a breather, adjust my hours how I want to and go from there. So I feel like the balance is really good. And my husband actually works for my practice. And so he does my billing for me and he's, our practice manager. And so it's strengthened our relationship because it helps us to keep things objective, right? Like we're looking at numbers, we're looking at data a lot of times. So when it comes to us, we aren't emotional in that sense either, even with our relationship.
I think what you just brought up there is kind of like the circle of life because although I've had my fair share of guests on this show who will probably never work in a traditional office a day in their life, I feel like you almost need to, like, in your 20s and 30s to have some of those experiences. So while I wish that I would have started a podcast maybe, I don't know, in 2014 or whatever, I feel that going through like the traditional office setting in my 20s and 30s really helped groom me for
Correct.
the awesome life that I have now. Because when I
Yep.
connect the dots of my life, I see just how each step has benefited me and have put me
Yeah.
where I'm at now, where not only do I have a day job that I love and it's got a great balance to it, but I'm now almost 200 episodes into doing this. And
Go
yeah,
Yale.
that's right. And I would not have gotten there without some of the experiences that I had in the
Correct.
corporate world. So
Correct.
there is a lot to be said for having those experiences. And I think it's just all in how you want to use it because not
Correct.
everybody wants to be an entrepreneur and have their own
Right.
business. Some people are fine being a cog in the machine, and there's nothing wrong with that either. I know I have my days where I'm like, ugh, but most of the time I love, having my own business and doing my own thing. And I could, like, it's hard for me to imagine not doing all this anymore just because I feel like I have so much passion for it. And I feel like once you find that thing that you're really passionate about and you feel like you can't, like, quote unquote breathe without having that in your life, like there's just no going back.
Yep, I agree. And one of the things that stuck with me a while ago, I had the opportunity to meet Damon John from Shark Tank. That was probably the outside of like my wedding and having my children, I would say that was probably one of the best days of my life. And I say that because he talked about how important it was that if you are creating a business, you need to be filling a need. You need to be doing something that other people are not doing. You need to, and there's a book that he talked about called Blue Ocean Strategy. And that was part of what I thought about when I was coming up, with this app. And I think, yeah, like, a lot of people try to glorify the entrepreneur lifestyle, but it's not for everybody, I mean, because sometimes it's like you're up at 2 or 3 in the morning, you're like, okay, I gotta run this budget, I gotta do this, I gotta file taxes, I gotta do, and so it's like it's a kind of constant thing. But being able to have that hybrid, I think is a beautiful thing. And that's what I've kind of found with consulting and then doing telemedicine and then having tech. It never gets boring. And I think for me, that sort of circle of not knowing what you're going to get, that's something that I've always loved with family medicine. Like, you never know what's going to be next. You might have a 7-day-old baby that just got out of the hospital, and they're so little and they're so tiny, and not catching baby fever, obviously. I'm
Yeah.
trying not to anyway. And then, and then, seeing that older patient, who just loves to show you pictures of their grandkids. And, I think that's what life's all about. And I think finding whatever balance that works for you and not being afraid to pivot, not being afraid to start over, not being able to say, you know what, this didn't work, and not being prideful and doubling down on it. That's one of the things that I feel like I learned in 2025, that if something doesn't work out, it is okay to walk away. You do not have to see it through if it doesn't suit you, if it doesn't serve you. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned. And so not being afraid to pivot has been one of the things that I think that's helped me the most to shape the life that I want to have.
That is wonderful entrepreneurial advice. I agree with all those points. And it's all stuff that I've learned over the years. And, you are going to have moments where you're going to feel gutted because it's your business. If something doesn't go quite the way you want it to, I know I've tried having a few people on this show and it did not go the way I wanted it to. Had to scrap the episode. Certainly wouldn't say that if the episode was live. Any episode that's live was like a wonderful episode, great experience. And I'm not just saying that, they've all been really great. And those are the episodes, each one of those are a reminder of why, at least one of the many reasons that I'm doing this. And when you're listening to an episode like this, which has been amazing, you might be listening and think, oh, that just seems easy. It does take a lot of work, and you are, especially for me being a solopreneur, you're gonna have moments where you're gonna have the tough episode that doesn't work out the way you want it to, or you're gonna have something else pop up. You have to kind of be willing to take those losses, but
Yep.
also like dust yourself off and keep going and see the bright side of what you're doing and the passion and the service that you're providing. And I think you are more than seeing that and nailing it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you. It's been a wonderful conversation.
It's been amazing. And I do want to give you a chance to wrap up. and tell everybody how they can find you, how they can work with you, and anything else you want to add.
Perfect. So, I am board certified in family medicine. I'm licensed in 21 states. And so my website is www.zaramedical.com. We have a complete online booking process that's simple, takes about 5 minutes, and I provide virtual care. I also have the AI mental health coaching app that we just launched about 2 weeks ago called Serene Space AI, and the website is serenespace.ai. And it's a free 7-day trial, so you can try it, leave us feedback, comments, let us know what you think. It's currently a web app that can be downloaded to mobile, but we'll be converting it over to the App Store and Google Play Store very soon. And if you are looking to donate to a great cause, feel free to send us an email at info@serenespace.ai, and we'd love to talk to you. I love to do speaking engagements. I love to do any sort of roundtable discussions, conferences, anything. But I feel like the wave of the future is finding out how to put technology together at the heart of interactions with people. And I think that it creates just a beautiful thing.
Well, I hate to stroke my own ego, and hopefully this is not stroking my own ego, but I feel
You
like
stroke it.
I feel like we created a beautiful thing with this episode. This was
We
tremendous,
did. It was
and
beautiful.
I really enjoyed this conversation. This was fantastic, and thank you for following up
Of
and making
course.
me aware of Serene Space and this wonderful new service that you're offering. I enjoyed hearing about everything, and I thank you for being on Mark My Words.
Thank you, and I appreciate you for having me.
Absolutely, anytime, and I'm gonna wrap up so that we can move on with our day. So thank you all for tuning in, and I'll be back very soon with another awesome guest. And that's it. Bye for now. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.